I didn't realize my whole relationship was a lie until the night my girlfriend laughed at me in front of her friends. Back then, I honestly thought my life was pretty solid. I'm 30, work as a content strategist, pay my bills on time, and I'm not a complete idiot. Or at least that's what I believed. For about 2.5 years, I thought I was building a future with a woman named Amber. Turns out, I was just building a very detailed fantasy around a person who never saw me the same way. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. One of those crowded apartment gatherings where the music is slightly too loud and the snacks are gone in the first hour. Amber walked in late, laughing at something on her phone, hair pulled back, blazer over a simple dress. She had this focused energy, like her brain was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Someone introduced us. We started talking about podcasts and bad bosses, and it just clicked. You know that feeling when you think, okay, this might actually be something? That was me that night. Amber was working as an operations coordinator at a tech startup. She was ambitious, always talking about scaling teams, new tools, and how she'd be running her own department soon. I liked that about her. I liked that she wasn't just drifting. We started seeing each other regularly. Texts every morning, late-night calls, quick dinners between her crazy days at work. Within 3 months, her toothbrush was in my bathroom. A few weeks later, half her closet was in my bedroom. We never had a formal move-in conversation. One day I just realized most of her stuff was already there. We slid into this comfortable rhythm. Sunday grocery runs, arguing over which brand of coffee tasted better. Weeknights on the couch, some random Netflix show playing while she answered emails on her laptop, and I finished up campaigns on mine. Weekend brunch at the same crowded place downtown, where the waiters knew our drink orders. It looked like a relationship. It felt like a relationship, and I let that be enough. Looking back now, the cracks were there. I just didn't want to look too closely. Amber never wanted me to meet her parents. Anytime I brought it up, she had a reason ready. They're traditional. It's not the right time. I want to wait until we're really serious. The first few times, I shrugged it off. Some families are weird, right? But after a year, then a year and a half, then 2, it started to sting. 2.5 years felt serious to me. Apparently, it didn't to her. She also spent a lot of time with her college friends. At first, I actually liked that. I've seen couples who lose themselves in each other and forget they're separate people. Amber wasn't like that. She had her group chats, their dinner nights, their catch-up drinks. Sometimes I'd join, sometimes I wouldn't. I had my own friends, my own hobbies. Independence in a relationship sounded healthy. That's what everyone says, right? But little things started to stack up. There were girls' weekends that didn't include me, trips that sounded vague when she described them. She'd wave off details with a quick, "You don't know them anyway." It'd be boring. She always had an explanation, always something that made me feel like I'd be clingy if I asked more questions. Have you ever trusted someone so much that you start gaslighting yourself instead of them? That was me. I told myself I was being secure, mature, the chill boyfriend. I ignored the tiny knot in my stomach every time she mentioned her parents like they were some distant, disapproving gods I'd never be allowed to meet. I pretended the way she dodged certain topics was just her being private, not hiding anything. It was easier to believe we were happy than to ask why some things didn't add up. If you'd asked me back then, I would have said Amber and I were solid. Not perfect, but real. The kind of couple that makes it through stressful weeks and occasional arguments because the foundation is strong. I had no idea that one casual night at a bar with her college friends was about to rip that illusion apart in front of an audience. I walked into that bar thinking I was just meeting my girlfriend's friends. I didn't realize I was walking straight into a moment that would rewrite how I saw the last 2.5 years of my life. Amber had texted me earlier that day, telling me to meet her at this trendy downtown spot where she was already hanging out with her old college crowd. She sounded casual, almost bored, like it was no big deal. For me, it felt important. Meeting more of her people meant I was getting pulled deeper into her world. Or so I thought. The place was loud, all exposed brick and hanging lights, with music just a little too high for real conversations. I spotted Amber at a table near the back, surrounded by a bunch of women and one guy I didn't recognize. She didn't stand up when she saw me. No hug, no quick kiss, no reaching for my arm. Just a small wave like I was a coworker who'd shown up late to a meeting. That should have been my first real warning sign, but I told myself not to be dramatic. I slid into the empty chair next to her, and ordered a bourbon on the rocks. The conversation at the table was already in full swing. They were telling stories about some trip they'd taken to Tampa the year before. I remembered that trip. Amber had called it a girls' weekend, and I'd helped her look up flights, even joked about bringing her back sunscreen as a souvenir. Now, listening to them laugh about stupid things that happened on that trip, I realized there were details I'd never heard. Inside jokes, fights, late-night runs to the beach. None of those stories had ever made it back to me. I tried to laugh along, nodding at the right moments, asking a question here and there. But I felt like a guest on a podcast I'd never listened to. Amber barely looked at me. Every now and then she'd place a hand on my arm for half a second, like she was checking a box that said boyfriend. The guy across from me talked the loudest, made everyone laugh, and kept leaning toward Amber when he spoke. I told myself he was just that friend in every group who needs attention. Then Kayla, the friend sitting to Amber's other side, turned to me with this big, bright smile. She said something like how long Amber and I had been together and joked that we'd been dating forever. She added that 2.5 years was basically a lifetime in their friend group. Then she dropped the question that lit the match. When was I finally going to meet Amber's parents? I opened my mouth to give some vague, safe answer. Something like, hopefully soon, or we've talked about it. Before I could say a word, Amber laughed. Not a soft laugh or an embarrassed one. This was sharp, loud, the kind of laugh people use when someone tells a ridiculous joke. She tilted her head toward Kayla, then toward me, and said she would never introduce me to her parents. No hesitation. No wink. No, I'm kidding. The whole table froze. The music kept going. Glasses still clinked at the bar, but around us it felt like someone had turned the volume down. I felt heat crawl up my neck, that familiar burn of public embarrassment, and for a second I wondered if I'd misheard her. Maybe she was joking. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But nobody else laughed. The guy across from me suddenly found his phone fascinating. Someone cleared their throat. One of the women stared down into her wine like she could sink into the glass and disappear. Amber sat there smirking, swirling her drink like she'd just delivered a punchline. In that moment, something in my brain finally clicked. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was how she really saw me. Not as a partner. Not as someone she planned a future with. I was safe background noise in her life, and now I'd become a prop in whatever story she was performing for her friends. I didn't yell. I didn't try to defend myself. I didn't turn it into a scene, even though part of me wanted to ask her right there why she'd been living in my apartment if I was so unworthy of meeting her family. Instead, I felt this weird calm settle over me. I gave her a small, real smile, the kind you give when you finally understand a joke you should have gotten a long time ago. Then I told her she wouldn't have to worry about any introductions. I stood up, pulled a 25 from my wallet, and dropped it on the table to cover my drink. Someone behind me muttered something like, "What the hell?" But I didn't know if it was about her or me, and I didn't care enough to turn around. I walked out of that bar, into the cool night air, and for the first time since I met Amber, I let myself ask a question I'd been avoiding for years. If she could disrespect me that easily in public, what did she really think of me in private? I walked out of that bar trying to look calm, but my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my keys. The second the door closed behind me, all the noise faded, and I was left with this heavy, ringing silence. I got in my car, started the engine, and just sat there for a minute staring at the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to go back inside and demand an explanation. The other part of me was done begging for basic respect. I chose the second part. I drove home with my jaw clenched, replaying Amber's laugh over and over like a broken audio clip I couldn't mute. At home, I tossed my keys on the counter and checked my phone automatically. Nothing from her. No, where did you go? No apology. No, can we talk? I sat down on the couch and stared at the dark TV screen like it might give me answers. Minutes dragged into an hour. Then 2. Then 3. I watched the time crawl across the top of my phone and kept thinking, any second now she'll call. Any second she'll realize how bad that looked, how much it hurt, and at least try to fix it. But the screen stayed dark. No calls. No messages. Just silence. Have you ever had someone hurt you and then act like it's your job to chase them for closure? That's exactly what it felt like. I started to shift the blame onto myself because that's what you do when you're too used to giving people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe her friends knew the context and I didn't. Maybe I was making a big deal out of nothing. Then I pictured her face again, That smirk when she said she'd never introduce me to her parents. There was nothing drunk about it. That was sober. That was deliberate. I realized I'd spent 2.5 years giving her every possible excuse, and she'd spent the same time treating me like an optional extra. Around 11:45 p.m., my phone finally buzzed. My stomach jumped. I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped it, expecting to see Amber's name on the screen. Instead, I saw Megan, Amber's best friend. The one who had always seemed calm and fair. The one who told Amber I was a good guy back when we first started dating. Her message was short. Hey, I need to tell you something. Can you call me? That's not the kind of text you ignore. I stared at it for a full minute, feeling my pulse in my ears. Then I hit call. She picked up on the first ring. Hey, she said, and her voice sounded tight, like she'd either been crying or was trying very hard not to. What's going on? I asked. My throat felt dry. I'm so sorry about tonight, she said fast. That was completely messed up. I told Amber that in the parking lot. But there's more you need to know, and I can't keep quiet anymore. My stomach dropped. More. Megan took a breath. Amber's been seeing someone else for about 7 months. For a second, I honestly thought the call had cut out. The room tilted a little, and I had to focus on a crack in my ceiling just to keep from slipping into panic. What did you just say? His name is Brandon, she continued softly. Some finance guy she met at a networking event back in the spring. She's been telling us you two are basically done, that you're just convenient. She keeps saying she's waiting for the right time to officially break up with you. But in the meantime, she likes having you around. Financial stability, emotional support, a place to stay, you know. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My brain was buzzing so loudly I almost couldn't hear her. Convenient. That was the word she used. I thought you knew, Megan added, her voice cracking a little. I honestly thought maybe you guys had some kind of arrangement, or that you were on a break but still living together. But after what she did to you at the bar tonight, after the way you walked out, it's obvious you had no idea. And that's not okay. You don't deserve that. I forced out a thank you, because it felt like the only thing I could say that made sense. We ended the call a minute later, and I was left alone in the quiet again. Only now the silence felt heavier. Amber hadn't just embarrassed me in front of her friends. She'd been lying to my face for almost 7 months. The bar wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was just the first time she let me see it. I didn't sleep that night. I turned off all the lights, sat on my couch, and just let the darkness press in while my brain replayed the last 7 months on a loop. Every late night at the office. Every girls' weekend. Every time Amber had been half present, smiling at her phone while I sat next to her thinking we were just having a quiet night in. It was like someone had handed me a new lens, and now every memory snapped into brutal focus. I remembered the Tampa trip, the networking events, the nights she came home smelling like a mix of perfume and a bar I didn't recognize, saying she was exhausted and just needed sleep. Back then, I'd kissed her forehead, told her I was proud of how hard she was working, and tried not to be the insecure boyfriend. Now I saw it for what it really was. I wasn't her partner. I was her safe house. The place she came back to when she was done playing someone else's perfect girlfriend. Have you ever realized that the person you love has been living a completely separate life right under your nose? It's like discovering there's a hidden layer to your own home, and everyone else knew about it, but you. Sitting there in the dark, I felt stupid, angry, and weirdly calm all at once. Megan's words echoed in my head. Convenient. Financial stability. Emotional support. I wasn't her future. I was her cushion. Sometime around sunrise, my phone finally died, and I took that as a sign to move. I plugged it in, showered, made coffee I barely tasted. When it powered back on, I saw exactly what I expected and somehow still hated. A new message from Amber. Hey, can we talk? I think you overreacted last night. Overreacted. Like I was the problem for not enjoying being publicly humiliated in front of her friends. There was no, I'm sorry, no ownership, just a soft little nudge that tried to pull me back into her version of reality. The version where she did something awkward. I forgave her, and we went back to normal while she kept seeing Brandon behind my back. I stared at her message for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Anything I wrote in that moment would have come from anger and confusion, and that's exactly what she expected. So I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found Tyler. Tyler is one of those guys who can talk for hours about firewalls and encryption and never get bored. He works in cybersecurity, and he loves hypothetical scenarios. So I called him and gave him one. "Hey man," I said when he picked up, "got a weird question for you." He laughed. That's how all my favorite calls start. I asked him, in the calmest voice I could manage, how shared cloud backups worked. If two people were on the same family plan, was there any way one of them could see the other's photo backups? Purely theoretical, of course. He didn't ask why I wanted to know. He just explained the basics, how access worked, how logins and save passwords could make things easier. When we hung up, I sat there for a moment, thinking about something I hadn't paid attention to in months. Amber had been the one to suggest we set up an iCloud family plan to save money on storage. We did it one lazy Sunday afternoon. She'd logged in on my laptop, told me she was terrible with tech stuff, and asked me to help her set everything up. I hadn't thought about it since. Now I realized her login was still on my computer. Her password was saved. Her backups were probably syncing on autopilot while she lived her double life. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen lit up with my usual mess of tabs and folders, familiar and suddenly loaded with new meaning. I took a deep breath and opened the browser. My fingers hovered over the trackpad for a second while my heart pounded in my ears. Was this crossing a line? Maybe, but she'd already crossed every line that mattered. I typed in the cloud login page and watched it load, slow and bright. The saved email filled itself in. A small box popped up, offering to autofill her password. I moved the cursor toward the button. If I clicked it, there was no going back to pretending I didn't know. When I finally clicked that autofill button, it felt like jumping off a ledge. The page spun for a second, then her account opened like it was nothing. No alarms, no warning, just folders and icons lined up neatly on my screen. I moved to the Photos tab, swallowed hard, and waited for the thumbnails to load. When her photo library finally appeared, my whole monitor turned into proof I never wanted to see. Row after row of images, all sorted by date. At first it was harmless stuff. Brunch plates, selfies with Megan and the rest of their friend group, random screenshots, the same kind of clutter everyone has on their phone. Then I started scrolling. It didn't take long to find him. Brandon. I recognized him from the way Megan had described him and from the general finance guy uniform. Button-down shirts, expensive watch, too perfect smile. There they were at bars I'd never been to. At restaurants I'd only heard her mention as places she went for team dinners. At events I'd thought were work-related. I clicked on one image. Amber was in a dress I'd never seen before, leaning into him in a dimly lit restaurant. His arm was around her shoulders, their faces pressed close, eyes half closed, the kind of picture you take when you're so comfortable with someone that you forget anyone else exists. My stomach flipped. I kept scrolling. There were photos from a weekend trip I'd been told was a quick out-of-town work thing with her team. In the pictures, it was just Amber and Brandon. Hotel room mirrors, elevator selfies, drinks by a pool. And then I hit the set that made something in my chest actually ache. It was a series of photos from a cozy cabin by a lake. The trees outside were dusted in snow. The two of them stood in front of a fireplace, wearing matching sweaters with cheesy patterns. Brandon's arm was wrapped around her waist. She was leaning into him with a soft, relaxed smile. The exact kind of smile I used to believe was meant for me. The date stamp put it at a few months back, right around the time she'd told me she was too stressed to think about our future. Every trip, every late night at work, every vague weekend away, it was all right there, neatly organized by date. I felt sick. I wasn't just hurt, I was embarrassed for myself. For every time I'd said, "No worries, babe, I get it," while she was probably getting ready for another weekend with him. I don't know how long I sat there, clicking through picture after picture like I was watching a movie of my own stupidity. Eventually, survival mode kicked in. I selected the whole batch, every photo with him, every cozy moment, every smiling lie, and downloaded them into a folder on my desktop. Not to obsess over forever, but because I knew her. She would deny. She would twist. She would flip the story until I was the crazy one. I needed proof to keep myself grounded in reality. Once everything finished downloading, I logged out of her account and cleared my search history like I was the one committing a crime. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't just from pain. It was from something colder. Resolve. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to be done. That night, Amber called. Her name lit up my screen, and for a second my old reflex almost won. I almost answered. Instead, I let it ring out. She left a voicemail with that sweet, practiced tone I knew too well. She said she was sorry for embarrassing me, that she'd been drunk and stupid, and that we just needed to talk things through. She ended it with, "I miss you." Later, I texted her with a simple plan. "We can talk tomorrow." Grounded bean. 2 p.m. She replied almost instantly, thanking me, saying she was glad I was willing to talk. Then she sent 3 words she'd thrown around for years like they were a bandage for any wound. "I love you." I stared at that message for a long time. For the first time since I met her, those words didn't feel comforting at all. They felt hollow, rehearsed, like a line she used whenever she needed me to ignore something that didn't make sense. This time, I didn't reply. Tomorrow we'd talk, but not the way she expected. Amber showed up to Grounded Bean 15 minutes late, like always. The place smelled like espresso and baked sugar, and the quiet buzz of people working on laptops filled the gaps in my patience. I was sitting at a small table near the window, my phone on the table in front of me, the folder of photos sitting there like a loaded weapon. When she finally walked in, she was wearing the light blue sundress I'd once bought her for her birthday. It should have hurt to see it. Instead, it just felt like a costume. She spotted me and walked over with a soft smile, the kind she used when she wanted things to feel easy. No hesitation, no awkwardness, no sign she'd spent the night thinking about how badly she'd humiliated me. She sat down and immediately reached across the table for my hand, like we were just picking up after a small argument. "Hey," she said, voice gentle. "I'm really sorry about the other night. I don't know what I was thinking. I was drunk and being stupid." I pulled my hand back before she could touch it. Her smile faltered. For the first time in a long time, I didn't rush to make her comfortable. I just looked at her and asked, "Tell me about Brandon." The effect was immediate. It was like someone had unplugged her. The color drained from her face, her shoulders stiffened, and her eyes darted down to my phone and back up again. For a second, she didn't even pretend not to know who I meant. Then the performance kicked in. "Brandon?" she repeated, trying to laugh. "What are you talking about?" "The guy you've been seeing for about 7 months, I said quietly. "The one from the networking event. Finance guy. Matching sweaters. Cabin by the lake." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again like her brain couldn't decide which lie to reach for first. "Who told you that?" she finally managed. "Does it matter?" I asked. "It's not what you think," she said quickly, words tumbling over each other. "We're just friends, I swear. I mean, we hung out, but it wasn't." I almost laughed. That line is universal. It's not what you think. It always means it's exactly what you think, plus a few extra details you don't know yet. Instead of arguing, I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and opened the folder I'd created. Then I turned the screen toward her and slid it across the table. "I've got about 300 photos that say otherwise," I said. Her hand shook as she picked up the phone. She swiped once, twice, 3 times. I watched her eyes move across pictures of herself she didn't know I'd seen. The restaurant, the hotel, the cabin. It took maybe 5 seconds before she put the phone down like it burned. Her eyes were already filling with tears. "How did you?" she whispered. "iCloud family plan," I said. "You're terrible with technology, by the way. You should probably change your password." That would have been funny in another life. Here, it just hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. Her first tear fell, then another. These weren't the crocodile tears she'd used in small arguments about chores or schedules. These were panicked, desperate tears. The kind you cry when you realize you've finally lost control of the story. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, voice shaking. "Brandon and we connected. We met at that event, and we started talking, and it just kind of happened. But I do care about you. I didn't want to hurt you. Didn't want to hurt me." I let the words sit there for a moment, staring at her while the low hum of the coffee shop went on around us. People typed, milk steamed, someone laughed at a joke 3 tables over. Our world was falling apart in the middle of all that normal noise. "You didn't want to hurt me," I repeated slowly. "But you spent months lying to my face. You let me think we had a future while you built a different one with him. You humiliated me in front of your friends and then acted like I overreacted." "I was confused," she said, wiping her cheeks. "I didn't know how to end things with you. You're so good to me. You're stable and kind and convenient." I finished for her. She flinched, like I'd slapped her. She knew exactly where that word came from. "Megan, her best friend. She had no right to tell you that." Amber snapped softly, anger bleeding through the tears. She had every right, I said. She's been more honest with me in one phone call than you have in 7 months. Amber's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. Please, she whispered. Can we just talk about this? I'll fix it. I'll end things with Brandon. I'll do whatever it takes. I made a mistake, okay? Just, please don't walk away from us. For the first time since I met her, I realized something. There was no us. There was me, trying to build something real, and her, using that structure as a safety net while she played house with someone else. The question now wasn't whether she was sorry. It was whether I was finally done being convenient. I'd spent years protecting her feelings. For once, I decided to protect my own. I sat there, watching Amber fall apart across the table, and realized I didn't feel tempted to comfort her. Not this time. Not after everything I'd seen on that screen. Whatever we'd been before, we weren't that anymore. We were a guy who'd finally opened his eyes and a woman who'd run out of places to hide. No, I said quietly. We're not going to fix this. Her eyes went wide, like she hadn't considered that option was even on the table. Amber was used to me softening, backing down, giving her the benefit of the doubt. She wasn't prepared for this version of me. We're done, I continued. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your second choice. I'm definitely not your backup boyfriend while you try out other options. She shook her head quickly. You're not my backup. I got overwhelmed. Work has been insane, my parents keep pressuring me, and Brandon was just. I don't care what Brandon was. I cut in. I care what you were. To me. You lied to my face for months. You let me buy groceries, pay bills, plan weekends, all while you were sneaking around with him and telling your friends I was convenient. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. Her jaw trembled. Please, she said. We can go to therapy. We can reset. We can. Amber, I said, and my voice came out calmer than I felt. I want you out of my apartment by the end of the week. She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. What? I already talked to the landlord this morning, I said. The lease is in my name only. You don't have any legal right to stay there. I'm not going to kick you out tonight, but you have 4 days to pack your things and go. I'll stay at Tyler's place until you're done. Leave your key on the counter. Her tears turned frantic. She grabbed for my hand again, her nails digging into my skin when she caught it. You can't be serious, she whispered. Where am I supposed to go? I'll fix this, I swear. I'll block Brandon, You should have thought about that before you spent nearly a year building a secret relationship, I said, pulling my hand away. I don't hate you, but I'm not going to keep living with someone who treats me like a backup plan. She shook her head over and over like she could undo the last few minutes by sheer denial. You're overreacting, she tried again, voice cracking. We've built a life together. You can't just throw that away. I didn't throw it away, I replied. You did. I'm just the one finally taking out the trash. The words surprised even me, but they felt true. For so long, I'd been the reasonable one, the calm one, the guy who tried to see every side. That version of me had kept her comfortable while she walked all over our relationship. This version was done. I pushed my chair back and stood up. You have 4 days, I repeated. If you need boxes, the building manager usually has some spares in the basement. I'll text Tyler and crash at his place until you're gone. She looked up at me, makeup streaked, eyes red. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. I love you. Maybe she did, in her own twisted, self-serving way. Or maybe she loved what I provided, stability, a clean apartment, a steady paycheck, someone to come home to when the fun was over. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Take care of yourself, Amber, I said. Really, I hope you figure out what you actually want. But whatever it is, it's not me. I walked out of that coffee shop without looking back. As soon as I stepped outside, I pulled out my phone and called my landlord. He'd already heard the short version earlier, but I gave him the update. He confirmed again that I was within my rights to ask her to leave and told me to call if there were any problems. Then I called Tyler. I told him I'd need his couch for a few nights. He didn't ask many questions, just said, come over, and gave me the code to his building's front door. I spent that night on his lumpy pull-out sofa, listening to the hum of his fridge and the distant noise from the hallway, trying to process the fact that I'd just ended the relationship I thought would lead to marriage. It hurt. Of course it did. But under the ache, there was something else, something I hadn't felt in months. A thin, quiet line of relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't clinging to a version of us that only existed in my head. I'd chosen myself. I just didn't know yet that the universe wasn't finished with Amber. Not by a long shot. Amber moved out faster than I expected, but not quietly. Over the next 4 days, my phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. Long paragraphs about how I was throwing everything away, short bursts of "please pick up," half-hearted apologies mixed with guilt trips. I read none of them in real time. I'd already made my decision back at that coffee shop. I stayed at Tyler's place, went to work, tried to function like my life wasn't unraveling in a storage unit somewhere. Megan kept me updated so I didn't have to go back to the apartment while Amber was still there. On the second day, she texted to say they'd started packing Amber's clothes and bathroom stuff. On the third, she sent me a simple update. Most of her stuff is gone. She's taking the coffee maker. I stared at that line for a few seconds, then actually laughed. I realized I didn't care about the coffee maker or the throw pillows or whatever else she decided to grab on her way out. I just wanted her out of my space, out of my bed, out of my daily routine. By the fourth day, Megan texted again. She's done. Keys are on the counter. You can come home. Walking back into my apartment felt strange. The air was different, lighter somehow. The place looked emptier, no extra shoes by the door, no makeup scattered on the bathroom counter, no random cardigan thrown over the back of the couch. There were ghost outlines where her things used to be, but underneath all that, it finally looked like my place again. Not our place. Mine. I did one last walkthrough to make sure she hadn't taken anything that actually mattered. The furniture was still there. My books. My photos from before her. The coffee maker spot on the counter was empty, but the silence around it felt peaceful. I picked up her key from the kitchen and turned it over in my hand once before dropping it into a drawer. Just like that, she no longer had access to my home, my schedule, or my peace. That night, I blocked her number. Then I blocked her on social media, unfriended her family, and muted anyone who posted photos that might include her. I even went ahead and blocked Brandon, even though we'd never spoken a word to each other. I didn't want to risk a late-night message or some weird attempt at an apology. I didn't need to hear his side. I already knew enough. I thought that would be the end of it. Clean break. No contact. Life moves on. But the universe wasn't done clearing out the mess yet. About 3 weeks later, I was at the grocery store, standing in front of a shelf of cereal, and overthinking whether I should be the kind of adult who buys granola or the kind who gives up and grabs the sugary stuff. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Megan's name again. "Are you sitting down?" Her text said. That's never a relaxing question. I leaned against the cart and typed back. "I'm standing by the cereal." "What's going on?" She replied almost immediately. "Brandon broke up with Amber." I actually laughed out loud in the aisle. A couple of people looked over at me, confused, but I didn't care. My thumbs moved before my brain even caught up. Why? Megan explained that someone from their friend group had apparently told Brandon the full story, that Amber wasn't some heartbroken ex living with a roommate, like she'd told him. She'd been in a full relationship with me the entire time they were together. She'd painted me as a guy she was technically still living with while they finished out a lease. When Brandon realized he'd been the other man in her double life, he lost it. Megan said he called her a liar and a cheater, then blocked her on everything. Karma doesn't always show up with the timing you want, but when it does, it has great aim. For a second, I felt pure satisfaction. Then, surprisingly, it faded into something else. Not forgiveness, not sympathy exactly, just a strange, quiet acceptance. Amber was finally getting back what she'd put out into the world. I didn't have to raise my voice or plot some grand revenge. All I'd done was step out of the way and let the truth do its job. Megan didn't stop with Brandon. Her next message hit harder than I expected. "There's more," she wrote. Amber tried to go back to her parents' house. I frowned at my phone. I knew Amber's relationship with her parents was complicated, but I also knew one thing for sure. In her stories, they always took her side. If she cried, they listened. If she complained, they defended. "Let me guess," I typed. "They comforted her and told her I'm a monster?" A moment later, Megan replied. "No, they kicked her out." I just stared at those 4 words. I actually stopped pushing my cart for a second. Amber's parents? The same people she'd always described as strict but loyal? The ones I'd never been allowed to meet because it wasn't the right time? Megan called me instead of texting the rest. Her voice was low, like she wasn't sure whose side she was betraying by telling me. She said Amber had gone to her parents after Brandon dumped her, looking for a place to stay, and probably some sympathy. But things hadn't gone the way she expected. Her mom had already found out everything. Apparently, Megan wasn't the only one who'd run out of patience. Someone in their circle had told Amber's mother the truth, that Amber had been cheating on me for months, lying about the situation with our apartment, and using me while she played house with Brandon. According to Megan, Amber's mom was furious. Not disappointed, not gently upset. Furious. She told Amber she was embarrassed to call her daughter. She said she hadn't raised her to be a liar, a manipulator, or the kind of person who destroys people who love her just because she's bored. When Amber asked if she could stay there for a while, her parents said no. They told her she needed to figure her life out on her own. "She tried to bring you up," Megan said softly. Her mom shut it down. She said, "Don't you dare drag him into this again. You already did enough." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt vindicated. For so long I'd been this invisible figure in Amber's family life, the guy she kept in the shadows. To hear that her parents had actually liked me, that they'd secretly expected me to propose someday, and that they were on my side now, that hit in a weird way. At the same time, I didn't feel as triumphant as I thought I would. I leaned against my kitchen counter later that night and just let the swirl of emotions settle. I was glad the truth was out. I was glad I wasn't the only one who saw what she'd done as wrong. But there was also this deep, heavy sadness underneath it all. I was sad for the time I'd wasted on a version of Amber that never really existed. Sad for the future I'd pictured, the engagement, the holidays, the family dinners that had been built on lies. Sad that the fallout of her choices had rippled all the way to her parents' doorstep. This wasn't just my heartbreak anymore. It was a mess that touched everyone around her. Karma had done its work. She'd lost her secret boyfriend, her place to live, and the automatic support of her family. The old me might have seen that and felt tempted to swoop in, to be the one person still standing beside her while everything fell apart. But that old me had already walked out of a bar, logged into a cloud, and demanded his key back. This time, I stayed exactly where I was, on the outside, watching, learning, and quietly promising myself I would never ignore red flags this loudly ever again. By the time I met Hannah, I wasn't looking for a rebound. I was looking for respect. A friend convinced me to re-download the dating app I deleted after everything with Amber. I didn't expect much. A few awkward conversations, maybe a drink or two with people I'd never see again. Then I matched with her. Hannah's profile was simple. A picture of her in hiking boots on a trail, another one laughing with wind in her hair, and one shot of her sitting on a couch with a golden retriever's head in her lap. Her bio said she was an elementary school counselor who loved long walks, bad coffee, and good conversations. There were no forced jokes, no filtered vacation flexes, just a sense of calm. I didn't feel fireworks reading it. I felt curious. We started talking. Her messages were easy, thoughtful, never rushed. She asked about my job, my favorite way to spend a Sunday, the last book I actually finished. When I mentioned I'd had a rough breakup recently, she didn't push for details or try to turn it into a therapy session. She just said, "I'm sorry you went through that. You deserve better than that kind of mess." That was it. No prying, no drama, just quiet empathy. We met at a small restaurant that wasn't trying too hard to be cool. No neon signs, no loud music, just warm lights and the clink of plates. I was nervous on the way there, not because of her, but because I wasn't sure if I was ready to sit across from someone new without comparing her to my past. Then I saw her standing outside, fiddling with her sleeve, and my brain did something simple. It relaxed. We ordered dinner and started talking. About work, family, stupid childhood stories, terrible bosses, the shows we pretend not to watch but secretly love. Time slipped. The server came by twice to ask if we wanted anything else, then a third time to gently tell us they were closing soon. I checked my phone and realized we'd been there for almost 4 hours. I hadn't once felt the urge to check the time before that. On our second date, we grabbed coffee and took Scout, her golden retriever, for a walk around a nearby park. Scout decided he liked me immediately, which I took as a good sign. At one point, we stopped to sit on a bench, and she turned to me with this thoughtful look. "So," she asked, "when do I get to meet your friends? I want to know the people who are important to you." For a second, that question hit a sore spot. I thought about all the times Amber had kept me away from the people who were supposed to matter in her life. Her secret worlds, her double stories. Then I looked at Hannah. There was no angle in her eyes. No performance. She wasn't testing me. She just genuinely wanted to know the people who mattered to me because she was interested in my life, not just her role in it. Whenever you want, I said, and I meant it. She smiled and squeezed my hand. Like that answer told her more about me than anything I'd said all night. I'm not going to lie and pretend I'm magically healed. I'm not. Some days I still think about Amber. I think about how easily someone can lie to your face for months and still say, I love you. Like it means anything. I think about the red flags I smoothed over, the jokes I let slide, the way I accepted being kept in the dark because I didn't want to be needy. But I'm different now. I pay attention to the small things. The way someone talks about their exes, the way they treat the server, whether they answer hard questions with honesty or dodge them with charm. I'm not perfect, and I'm not paranoid, but I'm not convenient anymore either. Megan told me recently that Amber has been posting cryptic stories online. Quotes about losing the one, about regret, about wishing she could go back in time. I haven't seen them. I don't follow her, I don't stalk her page, and I don't ask for screenshots. The only reason I even know is because people still assume I care. But I don't. Not really. That chapter is closed. Amber can rewrite the story in her head as much as she wants, but I live the real version. I know what happened. I know what I tolerated. And I know what I'll never accept again. I didn't walk out of that bar just to prove a point to her. I walked out to finally prove something to myself, that I deserve to be chosen, not tolerated. In the end, I didn't lose the love of my life. I just stopped loving the idea that being convenient was the same thing as being loved.